The Hitchhiker. Written by Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. Narrated by Ron Mackenzie Lafergie. It all started with a phone call. Ring, ring! I jumped and looked at the phone with shock. Partly because I had just woken up, and partly because I hadn't used my landline in years. I didn't realize it was still hooked up. Hopefully someone at the phone company had overlooked it, because if it turned out I'd been paying all this time, I'd be pissed. I glanced at the clock. 7 a.m. Pretty early for a phone call, and much earlier than I usually got up, but I felt pretty rested anyway. I'd leave. Ring, ring! The phone rang again. I got a strange sense of nostalgia. I'd heard that ring every day of my childhood, and hearing it again brought me back to the good old days. The days when I actually knew people's phone numbers. Now, I didn't even know my girlfriend's. That is, when I had a girlfriend. Back then, the phone was rarely for me, but it still filled me with excitement every time. Who was there? What did they want? Would my mom yell at them for telemarketing during dinner? Nowadays, that last one wasn't an option. My folks had moved away to Canada a few years back. Out to Newfoundland, where my mom was born. I'd bought the house from them after winning a lottery. Nothing crazy, just a few $100,000, but it was enough for a down payment and to cover mortgage payments and other bills for a while. It was great. Sadly, the cash was running out, but I still had a few months to get a job. I'd get one. I just didn't have to push the last few years. I'd get one, for sure. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. This isn't the point of the story. What was I talking about? Oh, right, the phone. Ring, ring! Finally, I reached over for the phone. When I grabbed it, I felt a pretty big shock of electricity and dropped the phone, barely managing to catch it before it hit the floor. Hello? I said, putting the phone to my ear. For a split second, I enjoyed the feeling of a phone cupping my ear, before a strange voice replied.
Hello, is this James Smith?
The voice on the other end sounded odd, and it was hard to make out the words from the static. From what I could hear, the voice was deep and nasal, a combination you don't hear often. Who is this? I asked. I wasn't about to get roped into a survey if I could avoid it.
Is this James Smith?
Asked the voice again, much louder this time, but still just as distorted. Who is this? I repeated, not down to get bullied by some voice on the phone. There was a pause, and what sounded like a deep sigh.
You do not know me, and I suspect you don't wish to know.
Well, you suspect wrong, I replied. Who are you? After another pause, the voice answered,
You would call me an alien, though I would call you the same. I need your help. Your planet needs your help. Your galaxy needs your help.
Oh, great, I thought. A crazy guy.
You probably think I'm some insane human,
said the voice,
but I assure you I am not. Nor are you.
It added hastily. That was going to be my next thought. Though it wasn't particularly reassuring, as that was exactly what a crazy guy would say. Okay, what can I do to help? I figured I'd play along for now and see what this weirdo was up to.
Do you want the short version or the long version?
Medium? Is there a medium version? Another pause.
Fine. I am from a planet called Corlaxa this Matumboton, and...
I'm sorry, what? I asked. That was way too long a name.
My planet is not important,
interrupted the voice. But then why did you tell me?
You asked for the medium version, and I thought that merited the name of my planet.
Crap. He was probably right. Sorry, go on.
My people are called Corlaxans, and we act as peacekeepers throughout the galaxy. I've tracked a rogue entity to your planet, which intends to take over your world. We are on our way to your planet to neutralize the threat, but in the meantime, I need you to slow him down.
How am I supposed to slow down some alien?
We can help. This alien is a Schmorkian and is able to inhabit the body of another being against their will. There, it replicates and seeks out more hosts. This happens quickly and has already started on your planet, so we need to act quickly. We have located the Prime Schmorkian, and he seems to have taken up residence in your city. We need you to find him and stop him. Or, at the very least, slow him down until we arrive.
So, that's why you chose me? Because I happen to be in the same city?
Mostly.
Replied the alien.
If I'm being honest, you were not our first choice. You were just the first to pick up the phone.
I wasn't sure how I felt about that. It would have been cool to have been selected especially for this mission. I'd feel like the last starfighter. Turns out it was just sheer dumb luck. Oh well, it was still pretty cool. And scary. Yeah, mostly scary. Okay, so what do I do?
Is the telephone at your ear?
Yes.
Good. Keep it there, and put your hand over your other ear. You will feel some discomfort, but it will only be temporary.
I gulped as I put my other hand over my ear. Was I making a mistake? Before I had a chance to change my mind, the static on the line became deafening, and I wanted to tear the phone away from my head, but I kept my wits about me, grinned, and bore it. My muscles tensed as if I'd been hit with a taser, and it felt like spiders were crawling all over my skin. I made to cry out, but my mouth refused to open, stuck as it was in a pained grimace. Thankfully, it really was temporary, as the static calmed just a few seconds later, allowing my muscles to relax.
How do you feel?
Asked the voice. Fine? I wasn't sure what it meant. I felt a bit tight and anxious, but aside from that, I felt pretty normal.
Good. You should find yourself much improved. Schmorkian hosts have altered perceptions and enhanced physical abilities, so we need to juice you up a bit to keep up.
It was weird to hear aliens use the phrase juice you up a bit, but I guess if they were able to learn English, they could learn English slang too. Wait, did that mean I was like a superhero now? Could I fly? The alien's voice continued before I could think too much about it.
We've also made it so that you can see infected humans. While your main objective is to apprehend the Prime Schmorkian, he will have infected many of those around him. These people will stand out to you. You can't miss it. If you hold your hands over their ears, like you did to yourself moments ago, the parasite will be destroyed and they will be freed. Please realize many of these people have no idea they are hosts, and their lives are not yet forfeit. So only use force when necessary, and try to avoid killing, as that will simply release the parasite inside. Save as many as you can, for the sake of the victims and your planet. But, above all, you must stop the Prime at any cost. If you can liberate his host, that would be preferable, but force may be required.
I breathed. This was all getting intense. Well, it was pretty intense from the beginning, but now it was like really intense. This was a legit adventure. And from the sounds of things, it would be legit dangerous. I think I can do that, I said.
Good. There isn't a moment to lose. Remember, turn any hosts you can, but above all, avoid being captured. If you don't stop him, he will take over your entire planet in days. If that happens, we will have to take drastic actions. He mustn't be allowed to escape to other worlds.
I shuddered. I'd seen enough sci-fi movies to know that drastic actions meant blowing up the Earth. And I like the Earth. All my stuff is here. Wait, I interrupted. You never told me who my target is. Do you not know?
Well, yes,
replied the voice almost reluctantly.
But I understand the Schmorkian has inhabited a much-loved human figure, and we were concerned that you would be less willing to help if you knew who he was.
Who is it? I asked apprehensively.
His name is Keanu Reeves.
Oh. Oh no. Oh, dear God, no! If Keanu Reeves wanted to take over the world, nobody would have the heart to stop him. Nobody would ever believe he could have bad intentions. He could do anything. He might even take over the world democratically. And I had to try to stop him. The thought of doing anything to harm Keanu Reeves made my stomach turn. I wasn't sure I could do it. But then, I thought about it. I wasn't harming him. I was saving him. I would be saving Keanu Reeves from a life of being controlled by an alien. Maybe we'd become friends. Move over, Bill. Ted's got a new bestie.
Are you there?
Asked the alien. I realized that I'd been sitting in open-mouthed silence for roughly 40 seconds, and I closed my mouth. Then I opened it again because you can't talk with your mouth closed. Yes, sorry, I spluttered. Keanu Reeves. Yikes. Where can I find him?
We have his coordinates on your planet. His current location is 34.0537330 degrees north and 118.2657070 degrees west. We cannot be more detailed than that.
As he spoke, I plugged the coordinates into my cell phone so I wouldn't forget. It turned out they pointed to a local hospital, which sounded about right for Keanu. Probably entertaining the kids. Then I realized that it wasn't Keanu in there, and much more nefarious motives began to arise.
There is no time to waste. Good luck, hero. May your path be swift and without grief.
With that strange sign-off, there was a click, and the line went dead. I pulled the phone away and enjoyed the silence, not having realized just how stressful the constant static had been. Then I straightened up and prepared for my quest. I grabbed my glasses and put them on, ready to face the day, only to stare out through blurry, dizzying lenses. I took them off again and looked around and found that I could see perfectly without them. In fact, I could see more than perfectly. I looked out the window, and as far as I could see, everything was clear. It was really cool. I could have stood across a football field from someone and counted the hairs in their nose. Wow. Okay, enough of that. I had a planet to save. I got dressed, realizing as I did so that the movie of my heroic adventure would start with me having a phone conversation completely nude. Dang it. The hospital was pretty close, so I hopped on my bike, threw my lock in my backpack, and headed out. My heart was beating fast, even before I started pedaling. It still hadn't quite hit me that I was on what could only be described as an adventure. I felt like Frodo. Or Sam. Definitely not Aragorn. He knew what he was doing. I was just making this up as I went. As I biked along, I marveled at my new vision. It was a bit disorienting, to be honest, but my new sense of space made up for that. It was like I knew where everything was, even if I wasn't looking at it. Very cool. I made sure to scan around to see if I could notice anyone glowing or anything, but didn't seem to notice anything. Either there were no hosts around, or they weren't as obvious as the alien thought. I hoped it was the former. I really got to see my new strength when I hit a big hill. It was a breeze. I drove up the whole thing in 5th gear, barely even losing speed. That was really cool. I almost wished I'd left the bike at home and ran to the hospital just to see what I could do. But I knew that time was of the essence. So I biked hard. I arrived at the hospital in no time, hoping Keanu was still there. I locked up my bike out front and rushed inside to the front desk. "Hi," I said, out of breath. Then I paused and slowed my breathing. Turns out I wasn't out of breath at all. It was just a reflex. Neat. What was less neat was that I had just realized I had absolutely no plan to get to Keanu. I was so excited to get on my adventure and so distracted by my new body that it hadn't even crossed my mind. I guess I was winging it. "Hello," said the receptionist, who was probably wondering why I'd trailed off like that. Yeah, sorry, I'm Mr. Reeves's assistant, and he really needs this, I realized I had nothing in my hands, so I reached into my pocket and grabbed a pack of gum I kept in there for breath emergencies. He needs his gum. It's urgent. Could you tell me where he is? You're his assistant? Asked the receptionist. He looked me up and down, judging me. I looked down too. Maybe I should have worn something a bit more presentable than gym shorts and a white v-neck. I really didn't think this adventure through very well. Yes, you can ask him if you want, I said, a bit too eagerly. Okay, I will, replied the receptionist, to my horror. What's his number? His number? You're his assistant. Surely you have his phone number. Oh, right, yeah, of course I do. But I actually have his phone with me. I pulled out my phone and waved it in front of him. Actually, he needs that too. Gum and his phone. Both of them. He looked at me with incredible suspicion, but then made a face that said, I don't get paid enough for this, and looked down at his computer screen. He did some lightning-quick typing and looked back up. He's in the children's ward, 4th floor. I'm sure you can follow the adoring fans from there. Thank you, I exclaimed as I hustled to the elevator. I probably would have guessed he was there if I had to, but it was good to have confirmation. The elevator door opened, and I went inside, quickly hitting the button marked 4 and spamming the close button. With just a few inches to go, a hand was suddenly thrust through the door, and it opened again. A woman stepped in, and my mouth fell open. She was glowing green. Like, I'm not talking a little pretty aura around her body. She looked radioactive. The green shone off her like She-Hulk meets Rudolph the reindeer. I now knew what the alien meant when he said I'd know it when I saw it. This would have been impossible to miss. She entered the elevator, and I held my breath. Which, thanks to my new body, was really easy. I probably could have done it for several minutes, no problem. If I had these powers back when I was swimming in high school, I would have been unstoppable. Stop it! Stop getting distracted! I had a world to save. As the elevator door closed, I glanced over at her and found her gazing at me with a strange look on her face. She quickly averted her eyes, but I could tell she knew something was up. I had to act quickly. Right when the elevator started rising, I bolted across it and slammed my hands over her ears. She recoiled instantly and tried to remove them, but I could feel the static emanating from my hands into her, and she quickly went limp. I went to place her gently on the floor when she regained consciousness as quickly as she'd lost it. She looked at me, confused for a moment, before remembering. Is it gone? She asked, her voice shaking with a mix of desperation and relief. Yes, I replied. It's over. You're safe now. Okay, this was the coolest moment of my life. Oh, thank you, she cried. Then she kissed me. Okay, this was the coolest moment of my life. You're welcome, I spluttered. Now I have a job to do. Can I help in any way? She asked. Can I help save more people? Actually, I think so, I replied. I need to get to Keanu Reeves. Could you get me in to see him? Oh, that's not a problem, she replied. I work in the pediatric wing, so I put my finger to my lips as the doors opened, and we stepped out onto the 4th floor. Oh, sweet Jesus. Everyone was glowing. I mean, not literally everyone, but almost half the hospital workers looked like glowing celery. That was bad. We need to be careful, I whispered to her. Lots of hosts here. She nodded and began looking around fearfully. Try to act normal, I said quickly, and she did. Try, that is. She didn't succeed all that well, but I'd have to hope it was enough. None of the hosts seemed to notice that she was no longer one of them, so it seemed that the hosts couldn't tell who else was one. Or, at least, they couldn't remember well enough to notice when a person stopped being a host. We approached the head nurse, who was sitting at the reception of the ward, and my doctor friend started chatting her up. I didn't let her know that the nurse was a host, because I didn't want to freak her out any more than I already had. Hey, Lucy, she said happily. Hopefully she was normally this chipper and wasn't overcompensating. "Dr. Monroe, how are you?" asked the nurse, though she didn't seem to care how she was. "Oh, just dandy, thanks." Okay, either she was the one person in a million who used the phrase "just dandy" in her normal life, or she was overcompensating. The nurse gave her a look, but said nothing. "Hey, do you know where Keanu Reeves is? I have a fan here who'd love to meet him." She gestured towards me, and I gave a dumb grin that said, "I'm the kind of person who would track down a celebrity in the hospital while he's meeting with sick children just so I could meet him and not see anything wrong with that." The nurse gave me an appraising look. "You're not going to attack him, right?" she asked. "You're not some crazy person?" She sounded like she was joking, but I could see a glimmer of seriousness behind her glowing eyes. "No," I laughed. I can't imagine I was too convincing. I wasn't exactly in the mood to laugh, but it seemed to be enough for the nurse. "He's in 409, she said. "But maybe wait until he comes out. Poor kid's in rough shape." I was kind of touched that an alien would still show this kind of care towards a sick child. Maybe they weren't so bad after all. I mean, it was still controlling a person against her will, so I was still going to try to stop them from taking over the world, but it was nice to see that they weren't total monsters. "Thanks, Lucy," said the doc, and we turned and started walking towards room 409. We turned a corner, and I could see a couple big dudes in suits outside the door. I would have assumed they were Keanu's security anyway, but the green glow coming off them confirmed it. "Hello," said the doctor as we approached. "I need to talk to Mr. Reeves when he's done in there."
Mr. Reeves is very busy today,"
said the burlier of the two, with a voice so gruff and masculine it had to have been put on to sound more intimidating.
"He has no time for autographs."
"Oh, it's not for his autograph," I said, thinking quickly. "It's yours, actually, in a matter of speaking. She just needs someone to sign off on his visit." I motioned to Dr. Monroe. "One of you needs to sign it." "That's right," she said, picking up where I left off. "It's just for corporate, liability and all that." The big guy grunted, looking me up and down, then looked at the doc. Clearly, I didn't look too authoritative in my shorts and t-shirt, but she seemed pretty legit. He grunted again, nodded to his companion, and left down the hall with the doc. I was pretty proud of myself. I'd managed to split them up, and now I could turn one without the other punching my lights out. Now it was just me and the smaller security guard, though he was far from small. He was a good head taller than me, and about twice as wide. Normally, I'd feel incredibly intimidated, but I had superpowers to keep me confident. I looked around. The hall was quite empty. Was it safe to free him? Or should I just wait for Keanu to come out? I was too hyped up, and decided having this beast on my side was too tempting to pass up. I pulled the trusty pack of gum out of my pocket and accidentally dropped it by his feet. "Sorry," I muttered, and slowly made to pick it up. Just as I'd hoped, the guard waved me off and went to pick it up himself. But as his fingers closed around the pack, mine closed around his ears, and I felt the powerful static kick in once again. His hands quickly sprang up to his ears and tried to rip mine off, but despite his massive forearms, it felt like a child was trying to wrestle my hands away. It was so easy. Moments later, the static stopped, and he dropped to the ground. I looked around again, and was relieved to find that nobody had seen the scuffle. A groan came from the ground, and Beefcake slowly pulled himself up.
"What's going on? Am I... me?"
"Yep," I replied, helping him to his feet. Again, it felt really cool lifting up the huge man with such ease. "You had an unwanted hitchhiker, but he's gone. Now I need your help. The other guard is being controlled too, and so is..." I was about to explain the situation, but Dr. Monroe returned with the even larger guard.
"She couldn't even find the form,"
he grumbled to his companion as he took his spot on the other side of the door.
"Oh,"
said the alien free guard dumbly. He was not quite as good at improv as the doc. His friend didn't seem to notice. I figured if it worked once, it might work again, so I once again dropped my gum at the feet of the bigger guard. He looked at the gum, then looked back at me, and smirked.
You want me to pick that up for you, milady?
He asked. If you wouldn't mind, I said, trying to go along with the joke.
I do, actually, he replied. Be less clumsy next time.
Crap. I picked up the gum and felt myself blushing despite my powers. I started thinking of another plan when suddenly the free guard grabbed his friend from behind, put him in a full Nelson, and started shaking him.
Get out of him, alien freak!
He screamed as he shook.
Get out of Barry! He's a good man! Get out of my man!
Huh. I guess they were more than friends. Didn't see that coming. I wasted no time and grabbed the big lug's ears, and soon I had 2 gorillas on my side. I was ready for Keanu. Which was lucky because, thanks to all the yelling, the door to room 409 burst open and Keanu Reeves stepped out. And I shivered. I'd never really found him particularly attractive myself, but the charisma that oozed out of him as he strolled out the door was palpable. I almost forgot all about my mission and joined his side right then. Even without the charisma, he still would have taken my breath away, as he glowed more strongly than anyone I'd come across. And his glow was a bright red. It was beautiful, but I knew the horror that hid behind that beauty.
What's going on?
He asked in his soft, calm voice, despite how hectic it clearly was out in the hall. I looked around and saw people start to stare, having been drawn by all the commotion. We need to go inside, I said to the guards, and they grabbed Keanu and rushed inside, followed by myself and the doc. I closed the door behind me and locked it. I'm sure the staff had a key, but hopefully this would buy us a bit of time. I turned from the door and was reminded of the sick child in the room when the kid saw Keanu being manhandled by his guards and started to cry. I wanted to console him, I really did, but there wasn't time. I needed to free Keanu. I had no idea how powerful he was or how long the guards could hold him. I'm really sorry, I muttered as I walked up to the struggling movie star and put my hands over his ears. I felt the familiar static and his eyes rolled back in his head, but this time it lasted longer. Much longer. I had my hands on him for a full 30 seconds, the static growing stronger and stronger, before something changed. I suddenly felt very heavy, unable to move. As if outside of my control, my head started slowly drifting towards his. I felt an immense pressure starting to build, as if someone were pumping air into my head with a bike pump. Then, to my horror, a long, spindly object reached out of my nose and started moving towards Keanu. Then another shot out, then another, and another. Soon there were over a dozen thin, flexible tubes connecting my nose to Keanu's. I felt a blinding pain in my face as if it was splitting apart. The pain was so intense I barely noticed the poor kid screaming his head off before fainting in his bed. Then, suddenly, the pressure was gone. There was a momentary relief. Then that relief was completely overtaken by terror as I watched a thick, green body emerge from my nose, connected to the tubes, which could only be legs. Keanu seemed to snap back to reality for a moment, eyes gazing in horror at this creature, but a moment later, it pulled itself up his nose and into his head. His forehead bulged for a moment before settling back into place. The security guards released him as I fell to the floor. I tried to talk, but I couldn't get anything out as I coughed up blood, which flooded out of my nose. I felt so weak, and my vision was swimming and blurry. "Thank you," said Keanu as he straightened up and fixed his shirt. "You did very well." I coughed and managed to splutter out, "What?" Keanu laughed, as did the guards and the doc. What was going on? "You haven't put it together yet?" he asked. He knelt down in front of me. "You get any interesting calls lately?" Suddenly, it all came crashing upon me. Everything clicked into place, and I tried to scream, but only spat more blood onto the floor. It was me. "There it is," he said, his face inches from mine. "You see, we're a team. A damn good one, if I say so myself." The guards in the dock laughed again. I felt ill. I thought I'd been saving them from a terrible fate, but it seemed more and more like I had instead cursed them to said fate. "Why? Why did I trick you? I find it's easier that way. When people know I'm in the driver's seat, they always try to fight me, and it's awfully inconvenient. But if I take someone desperate to prove himself and make him think he's saving the world, he becomes quite compliant." I hated him. I hated myself. He'd played me like a drum, and now I'd doomed the world. I rolled over and waited to die. "Don't worry," he drawled. "I won't leave you like this. Can't have you telling anyone about me, and you've been too useful to just die pointlessly. So I will allow you to join me. It really is quite blissful. You'll love it." He reached down and took hold of my ears. I felt the static once again, but this time it felt wrong. I willed myself to try to stop him, but my will had been broken. I had nothing left. Soon the static stopped and the world cleared. I felt different, lighter. I had a purpose. I was part of something bigger than myself. And despite everything I knew about the alien, I felt content. Then I heard a voice in my head.
"Welcome to my legion,"
came the voice, and I recognized it as the voice I'd heard on the phone. Though I now realized that the phone conversation likely happened in my head.
"I'm sure you will come to appreciate the simplicity of drone life. It's not quite as illustrious as life as the Prime Host, but I'm sure you'll be a fine addition."
"Let me go!" I yelled internally, though not even I believed it. I wasn't sure I could go back to the way I'd felt before. It was so empty, so meaningless. But still, while my mind was complacent, my heart knew this was not what I wanted. "Why are you doing this?"
"Oh, global domination. It's kind of my thing."
As we communicated mentally, I pulled myself up and stood straight at attention against my own wishes. He stood right in my face, staring into my eyes like people do in movies. But it didn't feel nearly as uncomfortable as it should have. In fact, as much as I hate to admit it, it felt exhilarating to have the Prime Schmorkian's attention, even though I knew he was evil and had just been inside me. I'm not sure how much of it was because of the alien and how much was because it was Keanu Reeves, but I was enraptured. I found that my vision had cleared substantially. It wasn't the eagle eyes I had when the alien was inside me, but I could see like a normal person. Which was good because it allowed me to notice a small twitch on Keanu's otherwise motionless face. Was he fighting it? Could he take back control? I couldn't tell, but seeing as it was the planet's only hope, I had to try to help however I could. Maybe if I kept the alien distracted enough, Keanu could wrestle control from him. For a moment, I worried that he could read my mind, but when he didn't say anything, it was clear that he could not. I'm not sure how I was being controlled, but it didn't have my whole mind on lock. "What do you want with the Earth? Why us?" Not exactly the most original question, but if I could get him doing a villain monologue, that might help.
"It's not like I came here on purpose,"
he scoffed mentally.
"I was being chased and attempted a tricky superdrive maneuver, but I must have gotten the math wrong because my ship ended up in Earth's gravitational pull and crashed. But I figured, hey, when life gives you Glyphpinkins, make Glyphpinkinade."
I guessed Glyphpinkins were the alien equivalent of lemons. It was weird that they had the same phrase but not the same fruit, but I guess some sentiments are universal. "So you managed all this off the cuff?" I asked. That's pretty impressive.
Oh, flattery will get you everywhere, my boy,
he responded.
And you weren't so bad yourself. I only had to nudge a few ideas your way, and you managed the rest yourself. Very impressive.
This time, his right eyebrow twitched pretty significantly. That was a good sign. Luckily, the alien didn't seem to notice. Maybe he wasn't quite used to his new body yet. Thank you, I said, holding back the urge to insult him. I gotta say, I didn't expect to feel this way. Just a few minutes ago, I was sickened by what I'd done, but now, I think I'm starting to see where you're coming from. This is, what did you call it? Blissful. It's blissful. This part was mostly true. And not the seeing where he's coming from bit, but I was shockingly pleased to be enslaved. It made me sick.
I wasn't lying,
he said with a mental chuckle.
And now, the moment of...
The mental voice cut off suddenly, and Keanu started trembling. It was subtle at first, and I might not have even noticed it if the voice hadn't cut off like that. But second by second, the shaking became more and more severe. The two guards approached the alien to see if he was okay, and suddenly his arm shot out and grabbed the big guy's gun. "Stand back!" he cried, though his voice sounded pained and forced. "Go!" The goons weren't sure if they should listen or not, because it wasn't clear if this was Keanu or the alien talking. However, that doubt was alleviated when he put the gun into his mouth. It was Keanu! He looked me in the eyes, and I could see a grim determination there. Without a hint of doubt or hesitation, he winked at me and pulled the trigger. I won't get into the gory details, but let's just say that he would no longer be the prime host. A split second after the gun went off, there came an otherworldly scream, and the alien's legs were thrust out of his nose. However, they lacked what little grace they previously had and were convulsing horribly. The creature forced its way out, but slumped onto the ground with a wet, slapping sound. The drones looked on in horror as it flailed for another few horrific seconds, then collapsed. Suddenly, I felt the connected feeling disappear, and I felt empty. So empty. Emptier than I'd ever felt before. I looked at the guards and the doctor, and they all looked just as lost as I was. The big guy even fell to the floor and started to sob. It would have looked a bit funny if it didn't feel so very, very sad. Sad for the loss of connection. Sad that my actions had caused all this. And, perhaps above all, sad that I just watched Keanu freaking Reeves shoot himself in the head. Jesus. Therapy, here I come. But first, I'd have to figure out what to tell the cops. The end. For now. Maybe forever. I don't know.